Modern business intelligence software can play a critical role in helping organizations redefine their business models. This is especially valuable in the wake of COVID-19, which caused tremendous market disruption. Learn how modern BI can help in this episode of Future Proof.
The future is here already. It's just not evenly distributed. Yet. Today's world teems with innovation. The nexus of hardware, software, and human ingenuity promises a revolution in possibilities. What does tomorrow look like? Witness Future Proof.
Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the briefing room. Yes, indeed, this is year 11 of our webinar series. We're rocking and rolling in 2021. And today I'm very excited to have Looker on the docket, Modern BI as the catalyst for intelligent transformation. And that's a really cool concept. I like this. We all know digital transformation, but what is intelligent transformation? It means you're really thinking through what you're trying to accomplish and you're using intelligence, business intelligence to get the job done. So our speakers today are Josh Parenteau and myself. Josh, of course, is a BI and analytics market intelligence lead over at Google. We're going to be diving into what Looker offers. And first, I'm going to talk about some of the abstract concepts that drive our industry. So I heard this just a couple of weeks ago on a radio show, one of our radio shows. A guy said, we all know that in technology, one more layer of abstraction can solve all of our problems, which is kind of funny, but in many ways, it's very, very real. So I thought we'd take a very quick trip down memory lane and think about the different ways that technology solves these problems and that abstraction can help. So think about virtual machines, right? Way back in the early days of data centers, we had very low use of compute, of CPU. And so that wasn't very efficient. We wasted a lot of money. And then someone came along and figured out they could virtualize machines. So of course, VMware is the leader in that space, but virtualization goes all the way back to the mainframe, way back 40 plus years ago. And what are you doing here? You're really optimizing your infrastructure. You're optimizing the use of your computers, of the actual boxes that get the job done. So virtualization is one of the first layers to abstract away some of the difficulties of dealing with individual boxes, individual processors, and so forth. Well, then the data layer, right? What did we do in the data warehousing movement? We had to pull all this data from operational systems because you couldn't really query the ERP system, could you? It wasn't designed for that. It was designed for operations, for getting things done. So we came up with this concept of an OLAP cube. Oh, actually, this is first we're talking about optimizing cloud, right? So Kubernetes, another wonderful development from Google. Kubernetes really is compute and distributed compute. So you can optimize the cloud. It's really the OS for the cloud is how it's described. And Kubernetes is incredibly powerful. It's a layer of abstraction all the way down at the bottom. So it's really just above the machines in a certain sense. And you're literally distributing compute to different environments. So this obviated the need to worry about whether or not you have written your application for this OS or for that OS, for this browser, for that browser. Really, really powerful, solved all kinds of problems with a layer of abstraction. Well, now the data layer. Let's talk about the data layer. This is a lot older, of course. OLAP cubes have been around for a very long time, and they were designed to optimize analysis, right? So again, back in the data warehousing days, we would pull all this information from ERP systems because they weren't designed for analysis. They were designed for operations. So we pull all this data and we build a cube, which is basically just a smaller version of the warehouse. And you do that for speed because you want to be able to do your queries very, very quickly. I actually did some research for this webinar, and there's an interesting debate going on out there in the data management community about whether or not Google BigQuery kind of obviates the needs for cubes themselves because it's so fast. And the short answer was, well, not yet. But obviously, Google BigQuery as a column store is extremely fast and really solves a lot of these problems. And just to kind of remind us here, the whole issue of optimization deals with performance, right? That's what we're trying to do is optimize the performance, whether it's of analysis or of the infrastructure, the hardware, for example, the different operating systems that you have to touch. The whole idea of these abstraction layers is to be able to optimize what you're doing. Well, if you think about how we got to the data warehousing world and how we're moving now beyond that, you also have these data models, right? So abstraction layers are data models in the data management management world. And you've got several of them, not just one. You have a conceptual model, which is your big vision of what you're trying to do. A logical model gets more practical, and then the physical model itself, all the way down to which machines are touched where, and so on and so forth, which tables, for example. But that's even that physical layer is an abstraction layer itself, right? Because what you're doing is you're really optimizing how the data performs, how the application performs by fueling it the right data at the right time. All of this stuff is really about performance and getting things done. So this actually photograph I took myself a number of years ago, and that is very granular. It's very tactile. Yes, that is a bullseye inside of a bullseye. I actually saw that happen. So you can get precision, and that's really what you want in these days, especially because of what? Well, the forcing function of COVID. So what happened with COVID is we all got to work from home suddenly, right? Retail operations were predicted to drop 10% or 13% or even higher than that. This is from way back in June. So what does that mean? So let's take the whole concept of intelligent transformation and apply it to the industry of commerce, of retail. Well, think about retail stores. Well, a lot of those had real trouble during this whole pandemic. The small ones, especially, the big ones were allowed to stay open so they could still stick around. But guess what happened? Lots of people started going online to buy their stuff through various e-commerce sites. Well, even an e-commerce website is basically an abstraction layer. It's a layer on top of virtual references to physical assets that are in various places. It used to be that you had to have your own warehouse, you have to ship all your own stuff. Then companies like Amazon came along and optimized that whole process for you. So they abstracted away the inventory side of the business, which is really powerful. So now if you just manage your e-commerce site effectively, underneath the covers, other people are coming up to the plate to take care of that stuff for you, to deliver your products to your customers. Really, really very powerful stuff. So I found some great research about e-commerce statistics to kind of help us put this in context. So 65% of shoppers look up price comparisons on their mobile device while in a physical store. Think about that. So what do you have to do there to intelligently optimize your business, to transform your business in a smart, data-driven way? Well, you need to be looking at prices of your competitors, of all these different products. That's not going to be easy to do manually. So you have to set up some kind of a schema where you're pulling data from these different competitors such that you can see in your own world what people are charging for all this. And you have to stay within certain boundaries. You can't charge too much more for this product or that just for convenience to buy it at the store, because guess what? People are looking on their smartphones and doing price comparisons while they're in the physical store. Right. Years and years ago, I actually heard a fun joke from a guy named Usama Fayyad, who was over at Yahoo for a long time. And way back when, they were able to use predictive models to kind of understand what people might buy, what people might not buy. And they realized that a lot of people were just using these models, using the predictions to optimize the process and then buying the product somewhere else. And he joked that to his client, we called those segments the bargain hunting bastards, because they were using this great analytical power and then giving the actual business to a competitor. So the point is, if you're going to optimize intelligently, if you're going to transform using business intelligence and using data, and you're in the e-commerce space, you really need to focus on pricing, because everyone is paying attention to that stuff. And I saw this one too. 81% of consumers conduct online research before making a purchase online. So what does that mean? It means you really need to optimize your e-commerce site. Remember, that's just a layer of abstraction under which you have connections to real assets somewhere that people buy. And it just gets drop shipped from Amazon or wherever. Lots and lots of companies do drop shipping these days that allows you to promote your brand while they're taking care of the hard stuff behind the scenes, right? Again, layers of abstraction. Very, very powerful. So 81% of consumers trust the advice of friends and family over businesses. Well, this is pretty interesting. So what does this mean for a business? With social data, which is abundantly available these days, hitting the Twitter API or hitting the Facebook API or hitting any number of APIs, you can kind of understand who influences whom. That's why we have this whole influencer world these days that helps us understand who are the key influencers in this market versus that market with this kind of product, that kind of product. So if you can understand what the, let's say, family and friends of high value prospects for your business are doing or recommending. If you can influence them, then you can influence your potential buyer. So if you're selling some high priced product, it really does behoove you to take a look at who out there is recommending this kind of product and see if you can influence them to better influence your prospects and transform intelligently. So what else? 80% of people stopped doing business with the company because of poor customer experience. 80%. It's all about the experience these days, the customer experience. And we know that people are impatient. We said in the abstract, we talked about a paper that actually my co-presenter, Josh Parenteau, wrote, an article he wrote all about what's going on in this industry. And he kind of talks about how you really need to pay attention and dot your I's and cross your T's, basically, because if you are creating a bad experience for your customers, they're not going to come back. It's very easy to go from one website to another website. It's a lot harder to leave a physical store, drive across town, and go into a different store. So this is just another reality of doing business in the modern world, that guess what? People are impatient. And the other thing that Josh pointed out is that a lot of these consumer trends are really starting to shape the mindset of the enterprise. So we used to have this sort of bifurcation in our head of what it's like to be at work versus what it's like to be in the consumer world. And let's face it, that's changing because expectations are going up much higher now in terms of speed, how fast a website works, how well the functionality is underneath to get me the products and the services that I want. All of that is really, really important. Even Google and Google Docs. I use Google Docs every day. I love Google Docs. It changed the perception. It changed the expectation of the end user for what is possible, what is plausible, and what really needs to happen to stay in business. And this is another interesting stat. Only 2.86% of e-commerce website visits can convert into a purchase. So 1 in 34 roughly. Now, maybe that's a lot of people doing research, but also it pays to pay attention to what people are doing on your site. So once again, we talked about using business intelligence and analytics to understand what's working and what's not working. There's been a tremendous amount of innovation in helping people understand who's on their website, where they're clicking, what they're doing, where they're going, how they're leveraging these technologies, which parts of the website. Heat maps, one of the coolest visualizations I've seen is a heat map. So you can see exactly where people are clicking on your website. Sometimes it'll surprise you, but if you pay attention to that, you need to constantly be raising the bar, if you will, on that percentage. And just, it depends on which business you're in. And there's a lot of stuff to watch out for. Bots obviously create a lot of noise out there. Bots aren't real people. They're not actually buying anything. So it's good to be able to separate those out. This is another aspect of using these technologies, of using analytics to optimize your business. And it's not just in e-commerce, okay? So I found a great case study for NASDAQ using Looker for a single source of the truth. And she was talking about how in their compliance and security space, they have to pull all kinds of data from all kinds of different systems to see how they're performing against compliance, against regulations. And she said that before Looker, the process of pulling all the data together so they could get just kind of a clean view for a dashboard took about 30 hours. Now it's down to 1 to 2 hours. That's a lot faster, and that kind of speed makes real difference, because if you're trying to stay on top of something as severe as a regulation, if you're in the financial services business, if you're in the healthcare business, you need to be able to understand what's happening. You need an audit trail. And then of course you need to be able to change things to optimize what you're doing in your business. So the point of the story here is that these layers of abstraction, especially things like data modeling, for example, which is all about performance, can really help your business intelligently transform. And it's got to happen, folks. It has to happen. I think this whole COVID scare was just a straw in the wind, and we need to be very careful about really understanding what's important to our business, what's important to our customers and our prospects, and really focusing in on our high value customers, our high value prospects, making sure that we're serving them and that we're serving them well. And Josh, if you want to go ahead and share your screen.
Yeah, thanks, Eric, and thanks everyone for joining. Hoping to spend a little bit of time building on some of the concepts that that Eric laid out. I think the most relevant to us and for our customers is really this concept of abstraction. I've been a Obviously, I work for Looker now, which is part of Google. And I spent a number of years myself dealing with, BI deployments and managing BI programs. So I've worn a number of different hats kind of in the space. And, the concept of abstraction, I think, is, it's relatively new, because if you think about the way we went about BI for a long time, is to start with a database, right? Build a logical model, deploy that physical model, build a bunch of ETL scripts to get data into that data warehouse, put a semantic layer on top, and do reporting, right? That's kind of the mantra, and I think probably most people on this call are familiar with that sort of dynamic, and probably still have that today, managing kind of that long cycle of building and maintaining those things: the warehouse, ETL, the semantic layer, and reporting. What that does not offer is a level of abstraction. It doesn't really get you kind of the agility that you need in this day and age, and all the things that Eric pointed out around being able to service your customer in real time, understanding their needs and being able to take action really isn't supported by that model. I think when you think about the semantic layer, I think we had the right idea, right? That the whole point of that is to abstract the complexity of what's happening on the data side from business users and analysts who either don't need to know or don't really care to know about the complexity. So designed to give kind of a really business user friendly way to interact with a very complex set of data. The problem with it, though, is that it's not agile. And what you find, and this is where I think, Looker is pretty unique in our approach. We understand and totally agree with the value of that semantic layer, that abstraction layer. But what we encourage is for business rules and transformations to be represented once and referenced, throughout, and not replicated. I think one of the things, and I'm just as guilty of this in my past lives, deploying older kind of traditional tools where, you start out with the intention of transforming everything in your ETL layer, and then you put stuff in the database. Well, doing that is a pretty long-winded process. So if a change is requested by someone, what's easier? Is it easier to do in your ETL, or maybe you just modify a database view? That same thing propagates through, the path of least resistance, then becomes the semantic layer. So you end up with some rules there. Worst case is you're building rules in individual reports and dashboards that users are using. So when you and we talk to customers all the time who are in this situation where they've got business rules just everywhere, right? They're in all of those above areas. They're doing some stuff in ETL, some stuff in the database, some things in the semantic layer, and some things in their front end reports. Obviously not ideal. So what we like to think about is, can we get to a point where our abstraction layer contains all of those business rules that makes it easy to serve up different user types, to solve different use cases, offer what we call different data experiences, some of which may well be reports and dashboards, but some may be custom applications, integrations with other tools. But just that is really such a fundamental piece of Looker's philosophy, and really how Looker started. I mean, this is fundamental to Looker's existence. The bet that was made 8 years ago now, where we said, building and forcing people to extract data from databases where they're storing their data and replicating that probably is not going to be the best architecture to scale and deliver deliver on growing data that's just growing exponentially. We're going to make a bet that we're going to have high performance scalable cloud databases, and the cost is just going to keep coming down. And here we are today. So I think it was the right bet to say we're not going to build an extract based architecture. We're going to go for the semantic layer kind of abstraction approach with that bet in mind. Now, Eric talked a little bit about cubes, and cubes, they definitely have their place, right? People are still using them. The reason you build a cube is to pre-aggregate, right, and deliver performance for questions that are known. So you optimize performance and you build cubes across dimensions and measures that you know people are gonna ask questions of. That's great if you know, but I think there's this whole other end of the spectrum where you just don't know, and you can't put everything into a cube. So really, I think the vision is, can we offer an interface into all of your data that resides, maybe in BigQuery, maybe it's in AWS, maybe it's in Azure or Snowflake or anywhere. Can we offer a flexible, highly performant, scalable experience that doesn't force you to guess at what people want to ask and have to pre-aggregate? So that's kind of the vision. Transitioning a little bit to BI modernization, I've talked a lot about why the traditional approach kind of has its limitations and weaknesses. Business, modernization, BI modernization and transformation is it's here. Like, I think there's no debating that we need to rethink the way we are using data in our organizations, no matter what industry we're in. And just some things, that we think about, that we hear from customers. I mean, obviously, last year, e-commerce was already a trend. E-commerce was already starting to disrupt before COVID. COVID just accelerated that by, anywhere from 4 to 6 years. So again, we're here. A lot of people were thinking about, how their companies are impacted and how their industry may change. It's probably changed. I think everyone kind of felt that. The next one is sort of thinking about the workplace. So 3 and 4 CFOs expect people to start working from home permanently. That's a huge departure from what we're used to. And, as Eric alluded to, I think, we are, I know I am sitting at the same desk that I, shop online at and pay bills at and, do everything in my personal life. I also sit right here and do things like this and other things for work. So the lines are kind of blurring, and that's really raised the bar in terms of where, I think where companies need to think about their employees more as customers rather than, just users of a system. So what are their needs? Like their expectations are elevating because they're used to experiences with consumer websites and applications. Those same expectations are flowing into the business world. And then obviously, business viability. I think every business has been tested last year and it will continue to be. A lot of disruption happening. So who can stay ahead of the curve and fight off those disruptive trends and be at a place where they can adapt more in a more agile fashion as things kind of happen that are unexpected. And I mentioned this too. I think everyone's feeling this. I think everyone sort of feels that, why when I'm interacting with an online website, why am I getting, really relevant and timely recommendations or suggestions on what I should do? But yet when I'm at work trying to make a business decision, however tactical or strategic that may be, it seems that I don't get any of that. So that's what I mean by expectations are sort of merging, where we've kind of given our work lives a pass and said, well, it's we're at work and those are some of the limitations. I think that's kind of going away right now. So we, as I think every business needs to think of ways to adapt to meet these expectations that people are now bringing to us, and that's not going to change. Even if as things sort of go back to normal, whenever that may be. I think we are forever conditioned as employees to think of kind of our interactions with business data as consumers. So I always kind of think of this, and it's been I think people are still doing this, and it just sort of, when you think about the flow of how BI has always sort of worked, it's always been about, let's get all of our data into a structure, let's get it into a data warehouse. And then let's go and pick a tool to put on top of that, a reporting tool or dashboarding tool. There's plenty out there. And then finally, let's figure out what to do with it, right? So we've built this enormous monolithic thing. We've got a tool that, without even really knowing the requirements, seems to fit well with that. And now let's go figure out what we can do with it. that's kind of the backward approach, right? Because you don't even understand the problems you're trying to solve. You're building the solution, putting a lot of time and effort into architecting it, usually coming to find out that when you get to the point where you're actually delivering the solution to people, it's not what they want, or it's not what they need, or they need changes to it to make it usable. Then you're back to that really long cycle process of changing your ETL, changing your database, probably changing, or finding where your business rules even are and modifying them. So it's a really long cycle process. It just doesn't work. Now, data, I think, in terms of how we deliver that, I mean, certainly dashboards and reports aren't going anywhere. Obviously that's a big part of what our customers do with Looker. They build interactive dashboards, they deliver them to, CXOs, analysts, even frontline teams. But I think the thing to think about is that is one, I would say, increasingly slimming piece of the pie when it comes to all the things you can do or should be able to do with a data platform. That is not your entire universe. And I know a lot of companies think that, once they've built a great KPI dashboard to share their metrics, or a operational report that gets distributed every day or week, that they're done. They've done BI. Modernization is really about thinking about, what other experiences are you missing out on? What user types, what use cases are you not delivering with BI? And we kind of bucket them into, again, what we call data experiences, where there's a trusted exploration use case. Your analysts need not necessarily dashboards, although they can use that as a starting point. But what they really want is to explore and ask their own questions. And when they get answers to questions, ask more questions. So kind of this dynamic of just really interrogating the data in a trusted, engaging way to get the answers they need. Integrated insights. So this is one of the biggest ones. I feel like the industry's been talking about this for a long time, which is taking data and insights and making sure that you're putting it into the right hands of the right people at the right time. I would add in the right context of where they're working. So we see a lot of customers who are using Slack, for example. Everyone seems to be in Slack or a similar type of tool, where that's where they live all day. They're having conversations with their teams, having conversations around projects, being able to embed relevant insights and findings so that they don't have to leave that experience and go into a BI tool or open up a report or a dashboard. Being able to deliver that to the right team, to the right person in context is really how you get engagement. And that applies to much more than just Slack. I mean, obviously, if you think about your sales team and your organization, they probably live in Salesforce or another CRM tool all day. Wouldn't you want to deliver insights about their pipeline or open opportunities directly to where they're working? That's kind of what this one's all about. So the frontline, probably less technically savvy users who, again, no matter how easy we think we are making self-service or logging into a dashboard, they probably won't do it, probably because they really don't have time. They're doing their jobs. Custom applications. This one is a huge area, right, of just potential and opportunity to meet the needs of not only customers but partners, suppliers, depending on what industry you're in. And they can be, they're often very vertically oriented. So, depending on what industry you're in, there's a lot of opportunity to build custom, just purpose-built applications to solve problems for really external people to your organization. And then, I think one of the biggest gaps that BI has always had is sort of the bridging the gap from finding insights and taking action, right? There's been a lot of emphasis on finding trends, finding outliers, finding patterns, even coming up with prescriptive and predictive recommendations, but all of that is kind of meaningless unless you do something with it. So building actions to do things like on the screen right here, pausing a campaign. Maybe there's a alert that was triggered where you're spending too much, you're spending a lot of money on a campaign that's not yielding the results, it's below a threshold. Being able to invoke action from the tool or from that wherever your insight's being delivered closes that gap. It closes the gap from insight to action. Again, that's where the impact is going to be felt.